So our next piece here is the Forbidden City. This is a big, major architectural piece here. We are looking at Beijing, China, which does become the capital in our Ming Dynasty. So Ming is our culture historical period here. We're looking at 15th century CE and later, because there are additions that are added after the Ming even. And that's about 1400, so thinking like Renaissance time in Europe. Our media, as its architecture, we're looking at a lot of different media, but stone masonry, so a lot of it is stone. We have marble, we have brick, we have wood, a lot of the walls made out of wood, and then ceramic tile, and that ceramic tile is going to help decorate both the flooring, including like the marble and stuff, as well as the tiles on the roofs. Floor plan is pretty intense, but you can see even here that there is a lot of space in the bottom section and a lot less space up here. So there is some reasoning for those visuals. When we are looking at the Ming Dynasty, the Ming, I like to think of Ming money because they love to spend money in the Ming. And because they love to spend money, we have tons of different big cultural works. So following the Yuan dynasty, which was Mongolian, Mongolia kind of spread and took over such vast amounts of land. They kind of Roman Empired themselves by spreading a little too much. And Genghis Khan was strong, but the sons and thereafter not as much. So kind of losing control bit by bit as they kind of colonized different regions. With the fall of the Yuan dynasty, the Ming have tons of money because of Yuan trade, but we are going to see a collapse of that economy because they spend too much. So they are going to create some hyperinflation, way too much spent. They're going to lose that mandate of heaven because of the economy crashing and several other factors for the Qing to come in afterward as the last major dynasty of China. Some major things that you may have heard of or like had in the back of your brain without knowing it. The Great Wall of China. So kind of a big piece. No, you can't see it from space. That's a myth. But the Ming are the ones that commissioned the Great Wall of China. And then you can kind of see this idea of separating and like closing in and protecting borders a little bit more, which is shown in Forbidden City as well. But the wall stretches the northern part of the Ming dynasty's land. So you can see they kind of fall back into this smaller, just Western China area here in the Ming. Another major cultural work is the Journey to the West. Journey to the West is one of like the most prolific literature in China. It has influenced so many things that like you wouldn't even believe. So for example, if you have ever watched Dragon Ball Z, Goku is based on Sun Wukong, which is the Monkey King in Journey to the West. The whole story is really fun, kind of silly at times, very over the top, very dramatic. So I highly encourage checking out some form of Journey to the West media to really understand like China. You gotta understand Journey to the West. It's a big deal. I really like overly sarcastic productions, like little summarized videos they do. So they're going through like the whole book of Journey to the West and playing along with that. I also like this goofy little Netflix version of the show. I believe Australia or New Zealand did it. So it's kind of funny. But it's a story about following a large journey of a Buddhist monk kind of spread. I don't know, it's very detailed, very long story, but the Monkey King is one of the most popular characters that have come out of that. So highly encourage checking something out there. It's super fun. Now getting into the Forbidden City itself, I'm not going to cover everything because I do want you guys doing your research for the one-pager homework, but I do want to touch on a few things. Like for one, this is one of the first like major building projects of the Ming because we are moving the capital to Beijing. So in the Ming Dynasty, they move it to Beijing. And they build this Forbidden City, which is the Imperial Palace, along with like the surrounding courts for the nobles. So this is a seat of government, it is a seat of rule, it is a show of power. Functionally, it's going to do a lot. There are religious stuff that happen here too. It's basically like a city within a city, hence Forbidden City. And only the elite were allowed in, and only the elite stayed. So it's surrounded by this giant moat. We've seen moats before, like Angkor Wat, but this giant moat keeps people out. You can see there's city around city in modern time as well, but it also keeps the nobles in. And we'll see this in Palace of Versailles when we get there, but I believed I talked about it also in Machu Picchu or Cusco. This concept that you, as a leader, a noble leader, right, like the emperor, wants all of the nobility as close as possible. Because when people are close, you have control over them. People love to talk tea no matter what culture they're in, right? But you're not going to say anything bad about the emperor if you're living next door to the guy, right? So that's the concept here. And the moat is going to functionally keep people out, show off that status, like, yeah, we're kind of special. We're like our own little island, but also you don't leave. So Palace of Versailles does something very similar there. And then we could see there is a division architecturally along this very, very symmetrical layout. Is we also have this bilateral cut that separates the outer court from the inner court. So there are additional walls you could see there that kind of have the more public sphere where government's going to happen, where more ceremonial things happen, versus the inner court where the elite are going to live. So you have that outer to inner that shows off. Even in that use of space, the outer court is a lot more spacious, inner court is a lot more compact. Drinking water. And then the walls, very, very tall walls. I believe they're 30 feet. Yeah, 30 feet tall, which is almost as tall as Splash Mountain, which actually, sizing wise, using Splash Mountain as a guide, this is bigger than Disneyland. The Forbidden City is so large, it is actually the largest complete palace complex in the world. Like, it tops it. So that's where the Ming love to spend that money. This thing is huge. So 30 feet high walls, and then that's gonna help keep the people that are inside in, and those on the outside out. You don't need to leave. Everything's fine in Ba Sing Se, Avatar reference. And making sure that no non-noble person gets in. So it creates this very like special status. Continuing our Disneyland metaphor, like the Club 34, just because there's like a door separating where all the fancy people go, you're like, man, I want to be in the fancy room. So there is that desire, and through the desire, you think of these people as even more important. And then the waterways that kind of integrate through the city and around. You can see there's people there. That's your scale for your 30 feet right there. Beautiful arch entryways into this gate here. People do visit. It is no longer forbidden. Some areas are, but they have opened up galleries to help kind of educate, because education important, very Confucian, right? So people can visit. So if you ever plan to go to China, check out the Forbidden City. Ooh, this is a good picture of the roofing here, which we see this evolution of these roofs kind of stem from Buddhist stupa and the chhatra at the top. Also like the Hindu layers, kind of the lotus, the reincarnation, Mount Meru concepts that have been translated and changed to fit cultures. So the kind of pagoda style starts getting really influential in China, Korea, Japan. The double roof here checking my notes. This is called the hipped gabled roof. So we're going to see another one of these roofs when we go to Japan and we check out Todaiji. So this double roof system, very popular at this point architecturally in East Asia. Not only does it look nice because you get this beautiful curvilinear line, it creates a sense of power, prestige, it's echoing some more cosmological ideas connecting to Buddhism, to Taoism, etc. But it also functions to keep birds off. Too steep for a bird to land on. You don't want pigeons on your roof of your imperial palace. Got to get them off. So I thought that was a little fun fact. And even like the smaller sections of the Forbidden City, like this is the Palace of Heavenly Purity, which is that big hipped gabled roof there, but smaller areas like the Hall of Celestial and Terrestrial Union, and the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, you could see all that is very uniform in the color, in the design, in the line work, in the rectilinear nature. Look at the columns. You have these beautiful column works with the wood kind of roofing system here. And the colors are very, very important. So we have the color red, which is a very powerful, very spiritual color, like brides wear red on their wedding day. It's a very important color, but also the yellow on the roof. So the yellow is tying to the imperial family. Only the emperor could wear yellow. That's the emperor and the family. So yellow is connected to the imperial family. So you're seeing, even through color, this connection to power, authority, to the mandate of heaven, the spiritual connection between leader and the people. There's also these beautiful decorative pieces on the ceilings, on the beams. We have this bracketing system that we'll get into more with Todaiji. But it creates this really beautiful look because the patterns and the contrast, and it has a beautiful like vertical meets horizontal composition to it. So it looks like it just interlocks perfectly. And they actually do interlock all of the columns and beams perfectly, like almost Lincoln log-ish, because they don't use mortar, they don't use glue. It is literally just slotted together. Perfect. So shows off super powerful architecture abilities as well. You get the best of the best for the emperor. And then we have an interesting feature here. When we're looking at the inner court area, this is where we're seeing, so if you look at your floor plan, like the upper area, the inner court, we have the Palace of Heavenly Purity, the Hall of Celestial and Terrestrial Union, the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. So that's what we're looking at there. But now, boop, all in a row. We also have this interesting, very Ming Dynasty thing that's happening architecturally. This is the residences for the emperor's consorts. So, complicated feminism moment. So, the Ming Dynasty, I believe they introduced this system, or at least they like confine it down to this very specific system. They have a consort system, and consorts are those wed or not wed to the emperor. So emperor number one, and then the women of the emperor have a very specific social hierarchy within themselves, which sounds insane in a modern Western ideology, but we're not judging, we're looking back, because the women of this system actually do have a lot of power within a patriarchal system. So no, not ideal for women, but there is interesting dynamics that come to play. So Empress is the first wife, like the main wife. Then depending on which part of Ming, you have the Imperial Noble Consort, which is like the second wife. So the Empress is going to be the one that is kind of second in command. She runs the inner court. She runs all the women in this harem system. She's into the politics side of things, more the domestic sphere, and the idea is the empress would have a son becomes emperor. However, empress may not have a son, so then you kind of work your way down the list of women to make sure that the first son is then in line to take over and continue that dynasty, because dynasties are family lineage. That's why this development of this harem consort system comes into place. So you have the imperial noble consort second in command, then you have the noble consorts after that, usually about 2 officially. Then you have the consorts, so the less noble. There's about 4 of them. Then the imperial concubines, and concubine was more of they're of lower status. They're less likely to gain power, but they still have power within this harem system. Then you have additional attendants and other female people in this system that kind of support each other. It's really different. But if you watch Chinese like historical dramas, they usually play around with this Ming Dynasty consort system, or you read the webtoons that are based in Chinese history. It's usually all Ming. It adds a lot of drama and preys upon women fighting women. It's a mess, but it does make good TV. This kind of falls apart in the Qing dynasty. It's less like a thing, but it is important to bring up this harem system because we're looking architecturally at these consort living quarters, so the living quarters of these women, and it is in this kun shape, this like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, kind of representing that character. And they are 6 identical walled palace structures. And this kun is like one of the 8 trigrams of ancient Chinese philosophy, and it represents the mother and earth. So it's showing just in its layout this divine femininity, the proper sphere of a woman being this domestic space, this connection between the mother and earth, the role of the woman to have children. So again, it's really messy feminism stuff of, yes, these women have some power, but it's in this very patriarchal way. And there is going to be a lady empress, sort of. She's an empress dowager, but she's empress in everything but name, that renovates this place. And she kind of like changes the whole layout. She combines the 6 into 4 and then loosens that control over the Chinese patriarchy. So she's going to come in. She is great. She's super like intense, and we love her for it. And she's going to kind of break down the walls a little literally here to show that change and respect towards women. Still, in her time, woman not respected fully, hence why she wasn't really the empress, but she was. But there is going to be changes based on women, the role of women. So very interesting. So that's the aside there. If you want to see Google Maps, take a look at that. And I would like you guys to label the different aspects using Marshall Russell's notes that I have in the slides. So looking at your Forbidden City map, just so that you can get used to what the heck is happening here. One of the big things before you get into labeling is this courtyard system. So courtyards are going to be open air spaces because nature is important. They start doing this courtyard system that allows for private and public, all within a private sphere. So a courtyard, good for like each individual family member. So you see these spaces within the Forbidden City. That's what that courtyard style of architecture is. And the further back you go, kind of the more private it gets. So that's why the bottom is a lot more open. It's a lot more public. The further back you get is more private. And then I like I usually use this in Japan too, but you can see how the stupa kind of gets transformed and taking some of those visual imagery into what becomes the pagoda. We're not quite looking at a pagoda here, but the sloping roofs do become very synonymous with the East Asian style of architecture. All right, so when we are looking at the floor plan, again, please label this in your guys' notes. The outer court here, the outer palace, is going to be where the official ceremonies happen. This is where the emperor is going to come and greet the nobles and the people that are within the Forbidden City. The throne of the emperor is in the exact center. So he is the axis mundi, basically, of the Forbidden City. So you're seeing that power of the emperor just in that placement. So he's in the center, boom, power. The important ceremonies are going to be done here. The Meridian Gate here is one of the major gates. I believe it has 5 arches along the wall. So you're seeing this southern gate into the Meridian Gate, and the Meridian Gate into the main location for ceremonies. The emperor is also going to be working within this building here, and that's going to be where his like governmental duties happen. When you're looking at the inner palace back here, this is where the emperor and the empress are going to live, so still along this central axis. So this north-south axis. And he is the only man that is allowed beyond this point because this is where the consort quarters are back here, as well as where like the eunuchs are castrated men that served as members of the inner court because they were castrated. They weren't going to have children with the consort, so it reduces threats to the emperor's rule, is the idea there. You have the concubines, you have the consorts all in this back area, so the one man / the men that couldn't have children and the ladies. So it's another, like I said, very difficult, nuanced conversation about femininity here. North Gate up top, we see the 30 feet walls around the perimeter. The moat is 170 feet wide. I was like, what did Mark? The Imperial Throne Room here, the Noon Gate down here is the southern gate, so Noon Gate to Meridian Gate into the inner court there. There are, in the corners of the Forbidden City, these 3-story towers that represents the 4 corners of the world. Layout as a total, because this is the new city of Beijing, they're kind of referencing all the power and placing it along the cardinal directions. So it is an axial plan. It is a rectilinear plan because it's a rectangle. The most important buildings are along that north-south axis. The main gate is on the southern end. Northern end is more protected. It's going to have a hill. Think of like the Mongolian Empire is north. The Wall of China is north. So there is this sense of protecting the north. And as a whole, this city is like a model of the entire cosmos. And this is a Confucian cosmos. This is showing off those hierarchies, but also like a heaven on earth kind of concept. If you want to see additional locations of where the buildings are, check out that. When you guys are doing your one-pager, use the Smart History, use the Learning Art History. I added this video as well. It goes into a little bit more of the deep history following when the Forbidden City was built. It has some interesting elements in there. But if you're curious to kind of bridge the gap between the Ming and communism, that's an interesting video to check out. There's some other interesting ones. Don't click on the YouTube shorts. Most of it's AI, so be careful. When you're doing your one-pager, and I'm going to discuss each of these a little bit, I do want you really paying attention to that function and thinking about how the Forbidden City connects to other ones of our works. So thinking compare and contrast skill, because this is a really strong compare and contrast FRQ potential. Really kind of cluing in and start using some deep critical thinking about how Forbidden City represents like Chinese political and governmental and societal stuff versus other places that we've seen. So, for example, Forbidden City has this very clear public and private way of organizing. So did Rome. The idea of holding nobility close and keeping them in a central city is something that we see in Palace of Versailles. It's something we see in Cusco and other areas. We have the use of a moat to kind of add to that protection and like closing in, versus how the moat is used in Angkor Wat, for example, to represent this cosmological journey. The moat has a different function here. We do, however, speaking of cosmos, have the Forbidden City with a cosmological map representing this hierarchical cosmos versus like Lakshmana or, again, Angkor Wat, keep bringing her up, kind of showing off that mandala, that unity, and central point being where all of the symmetry kind of stems from. Forbidden City does have a center. The Emperor is the center, not, the statue of a god, not Mount Meru, but the Emperor itself. And then the hierarchy beyond that, the fact that the Forbidden City does have a section that is made just for the Emperor. There is an inner court. There is an outer court. We've seen hierarchy in architecture in other areas, even the Colosseum and the placement of where people are at, right? Cardinal directions on an axis we've dealt with on most of our architecture. The symmetry in Forbidden City shows that balance of the universe and the balance the Emperor brings. So showing off that power even through symmetry. The Emperor has an audience hall. So you're seeing that the Emperor does speak to the people in some capacity and has ceremonies. We see our audience halls in other locations. For example, the Appendana, which is an audience hall back at the Palace of Darius and Xerxes. We're seeing the use of color, that red being a spiritual, powerful color, the yellow being color of the Emperor. So we're seeing color take on deeper meaning like we see in other pieces. This is a seat of government that combines the Emperor as the leader with the court that actually manages affairs. We see that another, like tons of pieces that we've talked about, like the White Temple in Ziggurat was a seat of government and also a religious location. Here we see semi-religion, where the Emperor is seen as that son of the heavens with the mandate of heaven versus like actually a god, right? So they're not praying to the Emperor, they're just honoring him. And Confucian, Taoist, Buddhist, different practices do happen within the Forbidden City as well. There is an integration of nature, not as much as like the Great Mosque of Cordoba or Todaiji or other pieces, but there is that level of nature. Palace of Versailles, another one that's good to connect. So nature is part of the Forbidden City, is very controlled. It is for the public space. So even nature itself is being controlled. There is a moat that is rectilinear. Water is not meant to go in a rectangle. So you're seeing that exertion of power over nature itself. We see the role of men and women having clear distinctions, even in the architecture itself. Again, that very complex Kun design of the consort region of the inner court that then gets changed by Sushi. She's so cool. I added that because she is. But we see a hierarchy of men versus women in different spheres in other architecture as well. This combination of multiple religions, this is not a religious site, it's a governmental site. So there are religious practices that happen. They're just not as clear because of the multiplicity of it. And then the fact that this does change its function over time, galleries are eventually opened up to help educate the Chinese population about the Ming Dynasty. I'm gonna skip past that. Some other just finishing up Forbidden City stuff, interesting features here. We have red lacquered doors that are on the gates, and there are, I believe, 4 main doors. 3 of them have 9 rows of 9 nails. The nails show status. There is an organization to it, this beautiful symmetry again. 9 is the highest single digit number, so it's kind of showing off that power over even like the concept of numbers. It's on a cosmological scale, the emperor is the most powerful. And I keep saying the emperor, but this is an area for emperors. There is, I believe, 24 emperors. Yeah, 24 emperors that live there, and then emperors that retire also live there. So there are rooms for emperors and retired emperors, and this lasts for about 500 years. The way that it became so big is because of the large labor force. So about 1 million laborers and convicts were used to create the Forbidden City. So huge workforce, 1 million or 100,000 craftsmen did most of it, and then 1 million built it. So 100,000 craftsmen, 1 million laborers, which is a lot. So it's showing off the Ming power again, just by the sheer workforce that they have. This is the Meridian Gate, so that's kind of that inner gate up into the emperor's outer court where the ceremonies happen. So it has these 5 arches. Flipping through notes to make sure I hit all the main ideas. This is the Gate of Divine Might, so that's the northern gate. It does kind of stop getting used by the end of the Qing, where communism takes over. There is a picture of Mao that's added to the front to show the power of communism over Chinese history, so that's always interesting. And then there's dragons. Lots of dragon motifs throughout it. Dragons were symbols of the empire, the emperor himself. So dragon being one of the most powerful creatures connecting to imperial power. And then Mulan has like a Forbidden City light kind of moment. So Mulan's a fun movie. So check that out. That's real cute. And then for more information and kind of a breakdown of the outer court, you can check out Fleet's slides and her videos. They're always a lot more concise than mine. But there's the Forbidden City, just like the surface. Like, again, this one goes deep. Really dive into your research because it is fascinating piece and a good reflection of Ming wealth and power at that time.